We're good. We are live. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Zoom. Welcome into another Tailscale Ask the Experts. I'm Alex,
I'm late.
and I think Lee has some fun show and tell stuff to get us started for this week. But
Yes.
yeah, what have you been up to, Lee?
It's been pretty busy. We have our sales quarter that ends at the end of January, so pretty busy at the end of January. With all the customers excited to become Tailscale customers on the solutions engineering team. What about you? How's the content coming at the moment? I've seen some amazing videos. I really enjoyed the monitoring one. What's next on the docket?
We've got two or three in the bank ready to go. There's one about NixOS and NVIDIA GPUs and self-hosted Olama stuff, like all rolled into one as this massive mega video that's coming out in the next
Very
couple of
nice.
days, as soon as I finished editing it, because I've got like 2 hours worth of footage to go through, but
Yeah.
another problem. We've got one talking about Tailscale and ZTNA, which should be quite a cool one coming out probably next week or so. Yeah, maybe a little bit of behind the scenes, how they make the sausage on like how Tailscale makes YouTube videos too. That's
I
coming up
like
soon.
that. Yeah, that's gonna be
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. It's one of the only channels I subscribe to. And my algorithm is nice and clean. It's just tail scale videos all the way through. No complaints from me. You actually the monitoring one actually inspired some of the show and tell stuff. But I thought we usually have like a little bit of a 5 minutes while questions roll in. So I thought I'd just do a little bit of show and tell of the stuff I've been building to make customers' lives easier while we wait. Please start sending your questions in. We will get to them in a few moments. I want to make sure that we've got a little bit of time for people to come up with the questions. But in the meantime, how about I do a little bit of a demo, Alex? How does that sound?
That sounds pretty good. But before you do, I just see there's one comment in the YouTube chat saying our audio is out of sync. If that's the case, please drop a comment, let us know. I don't know what I can do to fix it, but we'll try something. Hopefully, it's just one person that's having the issue. So fingers crossed. Anyway, Lee.
My voice and my voice and my mouth seem to be in sync, so I don't know what else I can do at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
so
in sync.
Yeah, indeed. For those of you who aren't aware, I lead the solutions engineering team at Tailscale, and our job is to make enterprise and corporate customers successful with Tailscale. And as you can probably imagine, we do a lot of repetition, right? Like a lot of the same problems come up, and a lot of the same questions get asked. And so I've been trying to take it upon myself as an engineer and a hobbyist software developer to build tooling that helps us kind of remove the repetition. So a couple things that I built recently. I share my screen. The number one question that we get is why am I not getting direct connections? You know, we have spent probably 100 person hours just this year dealing with this particular question. And the information is in the client. It's just not surfaced in a way that is super useful. And I wanted to kind of take the opportunity to learn a little bit about how Tailscale implements this stuff. So I kind of rewrote it from first principles and borrowed some of the libraries from Tailscale. And what I ended up with is a tool that I've written that's called Stunner. And Stunner will do the same thing that Tailscale does as it's navigating out of your network and show you what kind of network you're behind and what sort of NAT type that you're behind. So you can see here I'm on my home
Sorry to
internet.
interrupt. Sorry to
Go
interrupt you
ahead.
there, Lee. Would you mind just making that a little bit bigger, please?
Absolutely. I thought
Thank
I'd
you
made
very
it big
much.
enough, but there you
Yeah.
go. Is that better?
Lovely. Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah. What this does is it essentially like copies the logic that we use within Tailscale to create directions between clients. And you can see I've reached out to a couple of our derp servers, um, making a outbound connection. And if those two requests use the same port, then I have a certain type of NAT that I'm behind. And I've kind of surfaced this in a way which I think is more accessible than what we have in the Tailscale client. Now, you can get a lot of this information from the Tailscale netcheck command, but it isn't super accessible to people who aren't familiar with that information. So just to rerun it again, you can see it's actually going to tell me what sort of port mapping I'm using, the port that I'm actually using when I'm making that outbound request, and then it's going to give me a best guess effort at understanding what sort of NAT type that I'm behind. This is my home internet. I have UPnP enabled on my firewall for better or worse. Video games need UPnP generally. So another example of what this looks like is behind my Nemesis, the AWS managed NAT gateway. So you can see here I'm in an EC2 instance, and I'm going to run Stunner with the debug command, and it will show you all of the requests that it's actually doing. So it shows you the derp servers that it's sending to, the type of request that it's sending. And you can see behind an AWS managed NAT gateway, I actually see two different ports when I make the same request. So it's going to tell me that I am behind a hard NAT, and it's going to tell me the NAT type from like the RFC definition with a little bit more detail. So if you're ever really struggling to understand why you're not getting direct connections between two devices, run Stunner on both sides. It's on GitHub. I'll put the link in the comments so we can put it in YouTube, and it will give you a bunch of information about why that's actually happening. I am already chatting with some of the engineering team and the product team about getting this into the client, and I think that's the desired end state. But we'd love to get feedback about being able to visualize it in this way to give you this sense of like how these things work. So yeah, that's the first thing that I've been building. I don't know if there's any questions or comments that have come in, Alex, that you can
Yeah, a
send
couple.
my way.
So, I mean, I've got a couple of questions just as a curious nerd. Like, what did you write this in?
I wrote it in Go.
Hey, nice.
So it's like I said, I'll send um, a lot of it is a lot of it is the same logic that we've actually written this in the client, and you can see I'm actually using Tailscale's Netmon package and a bunch of other stuff to actually be able to, and the port mapper package to be actually able to figure out all this stuff. So I'm just extracting that information and using it in our own way, basically. But I wrote it in Go. I would call myself a hobbyist Go software developer, but good enough to. I certainly don't want to be running any production infrastructure right now, but I think for these kind of little debugging and friendly tools, I know enough to be dangerous.
So this will run anywhere that Go runs in theory, or anywhere that you've got a command line to install, like in terms of dependencies and things like that. One of the questions that came in from Sam IP537 is, can I run this on my Apple TV to figure out what's going on?
No, mainly because you don't have like a command line interface on your Apple TV. However, your Apple TV is behind the same network that all your other machines are behind. So you can run it on your laptop and it will give you the same output that your Apple TV is seeing, right? So like, it's generally going to navigate out through your network. So all clients that are behind the same router are going to give you the same information basically. So you can't run it on your Apple TV, but you can run it on your laptop, and that should give you a good reference point, basically.
Our next question, again, this is an Alex question. What is easy NAT and what is hard NAT?
Great question. Yes. So there's lots of different types of NAT, and if we look at here, you can see them all defined. So all these different types of NAT, right? Because these are very wordy and difficult to differentiate. Like I still struggle with the idea differences between endpoint independent mapping, address dependent mapping, address dependent filtering. Like it's just too complicated for me to be able to store that. So luckily, when the team started building Tailscale, there's a wonderful blog post by Dave Anderson, who is an incredibly talented engineer and a wonderful technical writer, who wrote the blog post "How NAT Traversal Works," which a lot of this logic is based on. What happened is they kind of turned it into three different, very easy to remember acronyms. We have EasyNAT, which is I can open an outbound port and I can reuse that port for inbound connections. We have NoNAT, which is basically you have a public IP address directly attached to the machine that you're on. And then HardNAT, which is I can open an outbound port, but using that for an inbound port is not necessarily okay. And so those are the kind of definitions. When you run Stunner, it will give you the official like RFC definition of the NAT type, and then it will also tell you if it's an easy or a hard NAT, just to kind of make it a little bit easier. So I would encourage you to go and take a look at the code as well. Like you can just see defining the constants up here that will give you a little bit of information. And then there's some logic down here, all the way down here, around like the NAT detail and like what different things mean, basically. So this is actually something, if you really want to learn how this stuff works, it's a good reference point as well, I think. Again, I'm just kind of condensing the things I have to repeat for customers over and over again into a tool that they can run and see that for themselves, basically.
Yes, exactly. That's the mark of a good solutions engineer. Rather than repeat the same thing 10
Exactly.
times a day,
Yes.
you write a tool or write a blog post about the thing that you're saying so often. I did just drop into the YouTube chat a knowledge base article, a technical overview about device connectivity, and that walks you through all of the different types of NAT that Lee just articulated for us here. But yeah, we need a link to that project, Lee, the GitHub
I
link.
will send it as soon as I stop screen sharing, but I do have one more thing to show you because
Oh, okay, all right.
bringing one thing just seems so. And I wrote this a little while ago, and it was inspired by the video that you made around like monitoring client endpoints and stuff. One thing that I think came up from customer conversations is this is really great information on the client. So we released client metrics, and Alex did a wonderful video about like exposing those client metrics and then using Prometheus to scrape them. But the thought process that I had and that we heard from customers is like, I don't want to have to stand up an entire monitoring stack to be able to see what's going on here. Because a Prometheus page will generally just display you a static page of values, and then every time you refresh it, those values update. So I wrote another little tool in the Go programming language that can actually periodically hit your metrics endpoint and show you the changes in these values as things happen. Now, obviously, I'm not doing very much over Tailscale right now, so not a lot is happening. But if you run this tool met and then point it at the endpoint, which is for a Tailscale client is the quad 100/metrics, it will actually show you like the information. This is compatible with any Prometheus endpoint. So if you have any Prometheus stuff in your environment and you just want to be able to very quickly see a visualization of metrics as they change, this is a super useful tool. It's using some very standard Go libraries that are like able to do like ticking. So it will refresh every single time that value changes. As I said, I'm not actually doing anything with Tailscale right now, so you're not seeing any values change. If I open another terminal and do Tailscale ping demo exit node US West, you should see that these values will start to change and as the packets start to change. And for some reason it's not working, but it does. I promise you it works. And this is giving you the capability of being able to see these things in a lot more useful visualization. And so if that's something that you have always wanted to do, hopefully that's pretty useful and you'll be able to visualize those things in a lot nicer way. So
Would
yeah,
you
just a
mind
couple.
just showing the native client metrics output just to connect how that speaks to your tool?
Yes, let's do new window. Oh, can't type all of a sudden.
Essentially, the client metrics expose things like bytes in, bytes out, packets, derp. You can see at the bottom, for example, outbound packets total path equals derp.
Yeah,
Like that's all the stuff that's going through a relay service. You can create alerting rules in Prometheus to say, hey, look, you've got a certain amount of traffic that's going through a relay server rather than a direct connection. You might want to investigate that.
exactly. Yeah. And you can see when these values change, it will periodically scrape and you'll be able to actually see, um, when those values change. It's just a nice, easy, quick visualization. If you already have a monitoring infrastructure that you're already using, something like Met isn't really going to be helpful. But if you are just like a home user and you want to be able to get an indication of like how many packets very quickly for a specific thing is going
Yeah.
direct versus derp, it can be super helpful.
Now, before you stop screen sharing, I have one final question that kind of relates to one of the questions in the YouTube chat. Talking about, we're gonna ignore geopolitical issues just for a second, just to maintain sanity. But there is a question here talking about from Leet saying it's great to see Tailscale as a Canadian company, but how much exposure does Tailscale have to US cloud infrastructure? So, Lee, I was hoping you might just run Tailscale net check and just give a list of all the derp servers and sort of talk through what Tailscale's cloud footprint looks like.
Absolutely, yes. So Tailscale has two cloud footprints that are kind of relevant for customers. The first is the control plane. And the control plane is what Tailscale uses to do things like authenticate you against your identity provider and authenticate you like from a key perspective. So we use the control plane to distribute public keys to all the different clients. That stuff is all hosted within Amazon Web Services in the Frankfurt region of Amazon Web Services. We do have a control plane that is located in the United States that we have for our enterprise customers that have compliance needs for being able to locate all of their infrastructure in the United States. It's worth pointing out that the control plane never sees any of your traffic. No traffic goes through the control plane. So that's basically login.tailscale.com and then controlplane.tailscale.com. That's only really used to authenticate you and distribute keys between different devices. The DERP servers are what are used to be able to connect two clients together, whether that is via the Stun protocol, which you saw with Stunner earlier, which is basically sending requests to be able to create direct connections between two things, or in a situation where you can't create direct connections, the DERP servers will actually relay traffic, encrypted traffic. And its job is just say, pass this packet from this client to this client, don't decrypt it, don't inspect it, don't look at it. This is a list of all the DERP servers that we currently have in operation. And as you can see, it will use the one that has got the lowest latency to you to be able to do those connections. So like I actually run my own DERP server because I am a glutton for punishment. And you can see I run one in the London region and one in the Seattle region. But we have lots in the United States geographically distributed across the United States. And then we also have lots of DERP servers around the world. So we have some in Tokyo, London, Paris, Amsterdam. You get the idea. If you like, you can actually set up your DERP map to only use specific DERP servers if you have a reason to do so. And so that is documented in our knowledge base. So you can just basically update your DERP map and say, I want to emit all United States DERP servers from my connectivity. If you really don't want any of your traffic going through the continental United States, that is easy to do. Again, we often have on the solutions engineering team, we often have requests from customers that only want to keep their traffic in a specific geographical region because they have compliance needs, or like healthcare providers in the United States generally don't want to use European infrastructure for a variety of reasons. Usually it's compliance based. It is possible to do that, and there is documentation out there to be able to do that for you.
That's fascinating stuff. Thank you, Lee. I didn't actually know that you could geo-fence DERP servers like that. So I've put a link for the documentation for all of our DERP server stuff into the YouTube chat, and I think our admins just plopped it into the Zoom chat as well. So follow-up question. You mentioned you run your own DERP server. Two questions from me on that one. Number one, why? And number two, should you?
I do it because some of our customers need to do it, and I want to know how it works and how it operates. And I can't really advise them on how to do that unless I have done it myself. That's the main reason. The other reason is I come from an infrastructure background and like hosting infrastructure in the same way that you do. It's one of those things that you just never stop enjoying. Should you do it? The answer for almost every customer and every user of Tailscale is no. And the reason for that is running a DERP server has infrastructure implications in terms of cost. It has infrastructure implications in terms of like overhead. It's not easy. The reason it's not easy is because you're essentially running the equivalent of a content distribution network. And that is expensive and hard. And there's a reason that organizations charge you a lot of money for CDNs. But that's mainly the reason. Now, why might you want to run a DERP server? The first reason is that if you need to have very specific addresses that your Tailscale clients connect to, and you don't want those to change. We at Tailscale run a whole bunch of DERP servers, and we can't guarantee that our Honolulu DERP server is going to change its IP address in the future. It's done via DNS. So some enterprise customers use whitelisting for outbound connectivity. And as a result, they need to have predictability in what those DERP servers are doing. And so we advise them to run their own DERP server with our support and help. The other reason is that certain countries have restrictions on their outbound internet connectivity, and public infrastructure is usually blacklisted. I'm not naming any countries, but I'm sure you can probably bridge the gap. there. And in those situations, running your own derp server can be useful. I do actually maintain, again, this is not a official Tailscale product. This is maintained by me individually with all of the things that come through that. I do maintain a RPM package or a Debian package for derp servers. You can see I just posted it in the Zoom chat. Hopefully we can share that out to everybody in the YouTube chat as well. If you want to do this, then go ahead, but I will not be helping you because that's too much work for me. Yeah, just bear that in mind as like a consideration here. It's not something that we recommend for a variety of reasons.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you for sharing all of that, Lee. Don't forget to share us the GitHub link for your
I'm
was it what
doing it
was it
now
called?
before I
Stunner?
forget.
Your
Stunner,
Stunner?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Funny
well,
name too.
I haven't watched WWE wrestling for 20 years and I have no intention of
Where is
starting
this
again,
going?
but I come from the days of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And when I saw the opportunity to call something Stunner, I jumped at the chance. And I think for the first time in 20 years, I saw a bunch of WWE stuff around. I don't know. John Cena apparently did something that was,
Yeah.
I don't know. But I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to name something after my childhood here. So yeah.
Well, welcome to WWE Happy Hour with Alex and Lee, apparently.
We know nothing, but we'll try.
Yeah. Oh, goodness me. That takes me back. I can smell what The Rock is cooking even from here.
Exactly. Yeah. He's still in there, apparently. I heard
Is he?
yesterday. So yeah. Um,
Well, let's jump to some of the questions. Thank you for that show and tell, Lee. I learned a lot, and I hope some of the audience did too. Calabia 19, I butchered that, obviously, but says, I'm not lying. I literally set up my first outside the network tail for myself using the Audio Bookshelf self-hosted app. Not kidding. Wow, that was easy. Awesome. Not a question, apparently, but
there we go. I love it. Yeah. You know what? We just keep the nice words coming. We love
yeah,
those.
we'll take compliments and cash those checks all day. So quick question from Zoom about Stunner saying, I like the idea of it and I tried installing it yesterday, but I couldn't quite figure out how to do it on Linux. The doc said to download the binary from the release, but I couldn't quite figure out how to do that. Could you potentially add a snippet for people like me?
I will update the README that shows you exactly how to do that. Absolutely.
Good stuff. Okay, so next question is about using a Raspberry Pi 2B as an exit node. And this person is called Andreas and they're on YouTube and they're routing incoming traffic through private internet access, a third-party privacy VPN. How does this work when PIA starts after Tailscale on boot? Can I do this via Docker when Tailscale's already installed on the host?
I'm happy if you want to take a stab at this, but I can also take a stab at it. Yeah.
I think it's going to be a question of just getting your systemd unit dependencies in the correct order. You can do a bunch of stuff with PIA, I think, about what's called a VPN kill switch. If I'm understanding the question correctly, you don't want traffic to leave the host unless it's going through PIA. At least I think that's what the question is asking. So you'd be looking to Google around terms like VPN kill switch and that kind of thing. I'll be honest, I don't know the exact specifics of how to set that up. I've never needed that kind of thing, but Lee, do you know?
Yeah, I mean, our recommendation for on the solutions engineering team, and obviously, I think consumer mileage may vary, and we recognize that consumer users of Tailscale likely want to have different VPNs for different uses. So, like, they want to be able to do Tailscale at home and PIA or other solutions for like full tunnel. Our recommendation on the solution engineering team is do not run two VPNs together. And the reason for
Yeah.
that is that they both have the same job, which to update your route table, right? So let's say you have PIA that is a WireGuard based implementation that's running on your machine. It's likely added a route to your route table that says for the default route, quad zero, send all traffic through this particular interface, right? Which has been added. Usually it's a ton device if it's Linux or OS X, and then Windows, it's, I don't know, ton device, maybe? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've used Windows. Tailscale does exactly the same thing. And so in Tailscale split tunnel mode, you basically add a route for the tailnet addresses, which is at the carrier grade NAT space to go through a specific ton device. As soon as you add an exit node, you now have two things adding default routes, right? So you can get it working, but it is very much advanced mode. And it's not something that we recommend for people that just want to have an easy experience with running VPNs, right?
Yeah.
My recommendation is if you really like PIA, we recommend using that for full tunnel. We do have an exit node add-on, which I think is extremely competitive in pricing wide with Movad, which has a long history of excellent privacy considerations and zero logging and all the things that you would want off a consumer grade VPN. And you can use those as exit nodes in Tailscale. Now, I'm going to preempt a question that we often get here, which is basically, well, I have a Movad subscription. Why can't I bring that over to Tailscale? Which is something that comes up all the time. The reason for that is that we don't actually know anything about your Movad subscription. We don't know anything about what you're paying, who you are, what your billing address is, all of those interesting things. So we can't like just grab your Movad subscription and bring it into Tailscale. Our recommendation in that situation is cancel your Movad subscription, do it through Tailscale. Everything will be great and you will have a wonderful time.
There's some questions and sort of follow-up discussion happening in the YouTube live chat right now, which I absolutely love, by the way. Talking about you can use Gluton as a sidecar proxy to route traffic through that way and use the network service mode stuff in Docker Compose. I've made several videos about on the channel. The other thing talking in there is saying from Bossman saying I would love to see support for custom exit nodes, not just Molvad stuff. So maybe custom WireGuard endpoints or OpenVPN Pro. You know we're a WireGuard company, right? OpenVPN.
We're not doing
profiles.
OpenVPN. I mean, has anybody used OpenVPN lately? It's a miserable experience for me, but that's just my opinion. So
Yeah, custom WireGuard endpoints would be an interesting one, but I think there's probably a few technical impediments that might stand in the way of that, unfortunately. Not least of which, how do you get the keys on the remote device? One of the things that happens when you enroll a new node into your tailnet is the control server, like Lee was talking about a couple of minutes ago. The control server does the key exchange for you. And so because of the way that WireGuard works using public key infrastructure, you can't rely on any other mechanism for authentication except keys. So I'm not saying it's impossible because ostensibly all things are possible really, but there'd just be, I don't know, like we've already shipped clients for so many operating systems, like a custom like vanilla WireGuard support. I don't see that one coming.
I
Don't rule it out.
believe that one of our engineers did like a thought experiment of like how would you add a WireGuard peer to Tailscale? And it is definitely possible, but the number of hoops that they had to jump through to make it work was just not something that was approachable for the vast majority of people. And I think it's worth remembering like we have a very technical audience here, and we have a lot of people who are everything from tinkerers to running production infrastructure on the internet. Like Tailscale's job is to work for everybody, whether it's your family member who just wants to be able to watch your totally legal media collection on your Synology or whatever media you're hosting at home. We have to cater to every single technological use case. And when we design and build products, we want to make sure that it's approachable for everybody.
Yeah.
That is something that you have to think about. Like, I think there's a lot of people who are watching along and are like, yeah, I'd totally love to connect my WireGuard to this. And like, if we increase the complexity in that way, it increases the complexity of the product, which means that less people get the benefits out of it.
Yeah, and that actually dovetails pretty nicely into another question I saw come through. I can't find it, but I remember what it was of, is there any progress for ESP32 support, so microcontrollers and ESP Home and that kind of thing? The answer is going to be along the same lines, to be honest. I know that ESP Home added native WireGuard support a few months ago, but as of right now, I don't think it's capable of running the Go-based implementation of WireGuard that we use as Tailscale. So for right now, the answer is no on that one, I'm afraid. But stranger things have happened. We'll
I
see.
mean, we are
I
a
would
we
love
are
to see
a
that one.
request-driven company. If all the people who want to do Tailscale that microarchitecture, come and tell us about it. That is a pretty strong product focus for us, right? Like we want to meet as many people where they are as they can, and we start with the most popular requests. So
Yeah.
go and round up all of your microcontroller colleagues and open GitHub issues and upvote it. That will certainly turn our heads.
Are you much of a tail drop fan, Lee?
Um, I certainly am for my own personal use. Again, like I use most of the enterprise features on the solutions engineering team, and I think what's so valuable about us chatting is that we have that rounded view of Tailscale from like customers versus consumers. I use it for my own stuff, but I wouldn't say that we see a lot of usage of it on the enterprise tier.
Yeah.
Primarily because, if you're an enterprise, you don't want people to be able to just randomly take intellectual property out of your business. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
it's usually turned off for enterprise customers, and you have to explicitly opt into turning it on.
Well, there's a YouTube question from Bossman about tail drop, asking whether it's possible to work with tagged devices in the future.
I'm going to defer to you on that one,
Yeah, I'm
Alex.
not
I,
sure
I
either.
literally just copy photos and videos from my phone to my laptop via
Right, yeah.
Taildrop. So yeah, I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid.
Well, it's kind of like AirDrop, but to any device, really. So
Mhm.
you've got it could be your phone, it could be a laptop, it could be a server, whatever. And as long as it's on the tailnet, Taildrop will let you send files between those devices. Bossman, we're going to take that question and follow it up in a future live stream. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. YouTube question again from Zachary asking about Unraid this time. It says sometimes I can connect with the supplied numerical IP, but not with the Tailnet DNS name. Any ideas why?
Theories? I certainly have theories. Do you have any ideas?
Well, Unraid is a Linux-based system, so I'm going to assume that there is a option called accept DNS in the Tailscale UI, in the Unraid UI for the Tailscale plugin that they just shipped. I think there's a checkbox saying accept DNS. That will affect things from the Unraid box going outbound. It won't affect things the other way around though, so I'm not entirely sure where the issue is, whether it's you're trying to connect into Unraid from a remote system and are unable to resolve the DNS that way or not. But certainly if it's from the Unraid box going outbound, make sure you've got accept DNS turned on.
Yeah, I think it's worth. And again, it's a common question that we have with our enterprise customers or our business customers is like, how does the DNS in Tailscale work, right? And as soon as if you enable Magic DNS and accept DNS in the client, as Alex just said, what essentially happens is that if you look at the resolver configuration, you'll see that the default resolver becomes the quad 100 address that is like the meta address for every Tailscale client. And that DNS resolver will essentially take a DNS request and say, is this in the tailnet's domain? Yes. Okay. Send it off, like return an answer. Is it not? Then I'm going to immediately pass through to the local resolver that's on the operating system, which may have been handed out by your DHCP address. It may be DNS mask. It may be something else, right? Almost every single time we see intermittent problems with DNS is because there is some sort of DNS resolver or caching resolver on the local machine that does not like those requests coming from the Tailscale DNS, like the Tailscale DNS resolver. And the reason for that is that lots of these DNS resolvers are very aggressive in believing that something coming from a quad 100 address is actually a DNS rebinding attack. And it will basically just drop that request. So what we generally find is if you know a little bit about the Unraid DNS resolver, I bet it has a localhost resolver that is like DNS mask or something like that. Look at the logs on there and you'll see something like rejected because if you add a whitelist for the quad 100 address, almost everything fixes that's fixed for almost everything in our experience.
Yeah, because each Tailscale node, including your phone, by the way, is running a local DNS server, like physically
Yeah.
on the device. So it actually minimizes a lot of the latency of making those DNS requests across the Tailnet because it's got a copy of all of your Tailnet nodes locally. All right, next question is regarding ACLs and grants. Ooh, I like this topic. Which one should we use and why? The documentation around grants is not as complete as ACLs. How do we limit, follow-up question, and how do we limit access to App Connector apps using grants?
Great question, and I think this is good feedback for us. So ACLs was the initial implementation of how to restrict access from A to B. Still works, is not going anywhere, is not deprecated, is not like, V0 or where we're V1. Everything is going to continue to work with ACLs. Grants is an enhancement of ACLs with additional capabilities on top of it. My recommendation for almost every single use case is to use a grant rather than an ACL. If you have existing ACLs, continue to use them. Don't need to port them over. They're not going to ever be deprecated. But grants have additional things on top of it that you can use around like application connectivity and a whole bunch of other stuff. So hopefully that's very clear. Use grants if you're doing things from scratch. You can continue to use ACLs as needed. With regard to app connectors, there is a mechanism within grants that's called VIA. And there's a really great page which actually just came up in our solutions engineering chat this morning, which shows you how to do that, route users through app connectors. And so I'm going to put it on here rather than like type it out. But basically, you can route users through app connectors through grants. It's in our knowledge base. The knowledge base article is 1378 with VIA. Again, VIA is only available in grants and not ACLs, and it's a mechanism for being able to say, if you want to reach this remote destination, you must go through this particular Tailscale node in order to get there. And that will give you the capability of being a lot more prescriptive in how you route traffic through there. So TLDR, use grants and not ACLs for all new stuff. ACLs aren't going anywhere. Grants have a lot more capabilities than ACLs, and so that's why you should use them for most things.
I like to kind of think of grants like ACLs 2.0. Like if we'd had the engineering, know-how that we have now when we wrote ACLs at the beginning, maybe that's how they would have just been from the beginning. But I think
all the things that our customers told us they want to do could be like that. That's the next version of how to do it, right?
Yeah. So what is an app connector? Would be our next question follow up here for
Yeah,
you.
I think app connectors are very commonly used in for our enterprise customers. So you have kind of a subnet router in Tailscale, which is routing traffic into a specific network. It might be a home network, might be an AWS VPC, might be a data center, which will allow you to route traffic where you can install Tailscale. You have an exit node, which will basically set a default route of quad zero and route all traffic. But there is an in between here where you want all of your traffic to go to your private network through a subnet router, but you don't want to have a full tunnel for all users because maybe you don't want to have everyone's YouTube traffic go through your infrastructure because that will have a material cost on your infrastructure bill. So an app connector's job is to specify domains that are outside of your network that you would normally use an exit node for, but only that specific domain. So we often see this used on the enterprise side for things like if you're using GitHub Enterprise, there is an option in GitHub Enterprise to whitelist specific inbound IPs to protect your intellectual property, right? Like all of your source code is what makes your business successful if you're a SaaS company. And you don't want to just allow anybody on the public internet to be able to log in and steal that. So an app connector will route all traffic to github.com through a specific Tailscale node, and then you can whitelist it on the GitHub side, and it will basically say, in order to access GitHub, you must be authenticated to Tailscale, which gives you that additional layer on top of like logging into GitHub as well. As British people, Alex and I might consider using an app connector to route to the BBC iPlayer. We totally wouldn't want to violate our British TV licenses by doing that, but it is certainly an option.
I'd love to see a TV licensing inspector come and knock on my door here in North Carolina.
Yeah, we have seen you watching Great British Bake Off, Alex, and we know that you haven't paid for your TV license. So, and I know there's going to be a whole bunch of comments now on YouTube being like, "What on earth is a TV license?" Well, ask us later. But that's a great example use case for a consumer user. If there's a specific website, for example, example, for us UK expatriates that want to be able to go to the BBC, I use it to go to the BBC website because I don't want to see commercials or adverts on my BBC website. So I use an app connector for that. That's hosted in the London region. But yeah, it's specific websites really.
Yeah, there you go. I think Lee's violated the rule of Fight Club there, so don't tell your mother. We'll be all right. All right, good
I've been
deal.
like,
So I think the way I typically try and describe app connectors to people when they ask is just simply say it's like split DNS, but for specific applications that you whitelist.
yeah.
So yeah, it is very useful in an enterprise scenario where you've got a hosted GitHub or who knows what else. Quick question from YouTube here. Would you say Tailscale is something to use for connecting to production servers that are constantly changing IP addresses and generally behind carrier grade NAT?
Yes.
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
That's kind of what the product's for, bud.
I mean, the
Yeah.
uniqueness of Tailscale is that it is one of the very few VPNs that will work behind carrier grade NAT. So if you have an ISP that hands out addresses from the CG NAT range, it will still work. So yes, the answer is yes. Go forth
But
and have a great time.
what is CGNet?
Oh, you're throwing all the tough questions at me
I
today,
mean, I'll take
Alex.
it if you want. I'm just trying to play
Yeah,
good
go ahead.
hosting
I would
with
love
you,
you to.
you
I'd
know?
love to hear your explanation. Yeah.
Well, so essentially, you get a public IPv4 address when you so for example, my AT&T router in the basement connects to my ISP, and I get an IP version 4 address of who knows whatever, but it's publicly routable. Other ISPs like Starlink, like often cellular based providers, sometimes the wireless ISPs, the WISPs, sometimes do this as well. They will have a public IP for their mast or whatever, but they won't give you a public IP to the clients that connect to that. So your Starlink box, for example, would have maybe a 172 kind of private IP address that you might expect to see as like a LAN IP sometimes. So essentially, what you've got there is called double NAT. So you've got network address translation happening at the mast or at the satellite level, and then it's also happening again at your local router. And there's no way for you to put a service on the public internet if you don't have a publicly routable IP address. Well, Tailscale kind of gets around that by punching holes out through both levels of NAT and then reverse mapping that back through. And look at the How Tailscale Works blog post for a much more eloquent explanation of the NAT routing stuff that we do. But essentially, carrier grade NAT is like the worst case scenario for trying to host a service behind a firewall.
I think the reason for it, to just accentuate Alex's point, is if you're a internet service provider that wasn't lucky enough to buy a /16 of public IP addresses back in 1994, you probably have a very limited pool of public IP addresses that you can hand out. And so let's say you are, I don't know, an up and coming cell phone provider in the United States that wants to build its own infrastructure. I would love to know where you got the capital from, but as an example, you can't hand out public IP addresses to every single cell phone that connects to your towers, right? And so you need a way of being able to differentiate the public address from the private address, and carrier grade NAT is that mechanism, right? And
But
so
what about IPv6, Lee?
well, that was going to be my next point, right? Like, I know that every year is the year of IPv6, and I know that IPv4 is going nowhere,
You
but I
know, it's
swear,
true. It is. It's
almost
the year of the Linux desktop, except in
oh,
networking.
again, yeah, I swear, almost like if you want me to be unemployed and not have to deal with like NAT traversal, IPv6 solves that problem, right? Like, almost every single problem that we have to deal with on the network connectivity side is because of IPv4. And IPv4 is exhaustion. So, if you're building an app, like as an example, if you're building an AWS VPC tomorrow for a new project at work, make it dual stack. There's no reason not to. Just turn on IPv6. There's lots of reference architecture now. Go and turn it on. Your life will be so much better. I promise.
Will it
Um,
though? I mean, most ISPs, residential ones at least, don't offer IPv6 out the box.
I certainly get it on my big red address because I will often be like, hey, can somebody else test this? Because I've got IPv6 and I get direct connections to everything. So yeah, I know it's geographically geographically decided, but I would love it if we would just have a bit of a push towards IPv6.
NAT
Maybe
is one
that'll
of
be
those
my
things, though. NAT's one of those things, though, that it's like it's simultaneously both annoying and frustrating to deal with, but also a massively important security feature in the modern internet.
yeah. I mean, I genuinely understand why it's around, but it is the bane of my existence right now. It certainly is the bane of my existence.
Job security lead, look at it like that. Think
Well, yeah.
positive. All right, another question from YouTube. This one's about TSIDP. I recently made a video about TSI, which is Tailscale's identity provider. It's a pre-release alpha piece of software that essentially lets you host an Open ID Connect server directly in your Tailnet. And the question here is there any news on further development for TSIDP? And would you recommend setting up TSIDP on a multi-node cluster to make sure it's working reliably? Well, no, to be honest with you, I wouldn't. There are plenty of other much more mature OIDC providers out there. I mean, some are free, some will cost you some money. But TSIDP is a hobby project at best right now. It will work, and I certainly still use it in my own personal infrastructure. But would I put it in the critical path of anything business related? Heck no. So that may change. You know, at some point we may get a request from a customer that means we spend a whole bunch of development cycles on TSIDP, but certainly for right now, at least, it's still just one of those. It comes with a free side of dragons. Okay, so not
Indeed.
recommended. All right, so from Zoom this time, John Cahill writes in, Taildrop works great everywhere I need it. However, if I'm dropping a file on a Raspberry Pi in the workshop, I have to SSH into Linux in order to accept the receive. Is there a way to auto allow sends over Taildrop on Linux?
I don't know. Do you know?
No, I was hoping you did.
Congratulations, John. You've stumped the experts. I think we should probably ask the tail drop developers that question in our internal Slack and get back to it. I don't actually know the answer to that one.
Well, I mean,
Um,
if I search the documentation for Taildrop for the word auto, nothing comes up. So I'm
that's a bad sign, isn't it? That's a
gonna say
bad
no
sign.
for right now. But John, we will take that as Lee says to the Taildrop development team. It's worth noting that Taildrop still officially is in alpha, so you know there's plenty of rough corners you might find, and this may well be one of them. So
John has said that that deserves a t-shirt, and I agree with John. So, John, if you want to send me the marketing team's on it, yes. Yeah, I think maybe we'll make that a new thing. If you stump us, you get a t-shirt. But yes, I think that is a pretty good. Yeah, let's go with that. You can't just ask like crazy questions though. We have to be actual genuine questions. My marketing team's budget manager just messaged me and said, "Whoa, now easy." Oh, in public, like, "Whoa, easy now, Lee." So yeah, bankrupting Tailscale for t-shirts is probably not the way to run a business, is it?
job security just ruined by overpromising
By
t-shirts.
overpromising t-shirt. If you do want a t-shirt, by the way, just as an aside, if you do want a t-shirt, we have hundreds of them when we visit conferences. Alex and I have a bunch of conferences coming up. We love to see people come and talk to us about Tailscale in person. I am going to pitch you on taking Tailscale to work. That is going to happen, but I think that's a fair price to pay for being handed a Tailscale t-shirt. And I'm wearing one today, and it's wonderful. So yeah, if you are at any conferences, go on hunt for a Tailscale t-shirt. And if there is a conference that you're going to that you want to see us there, let us know in the comments. We really want to know. We're trying to lean heavily. We have a wonderful events coordinator who is on top of everything, who I think would love that sort of feedback on what conferences we should attend.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from Stamp Overstock. But when is Tailscale going to be in the UK? I need a t-shirt. Well, lucky for
We're
you,
there like 3 times this month. So like, yeah, we
KubeCon
got
EU is
plenty.
coming up. What else is
Uh,
there?
DevOps Live, KubeCon EU, and then there's one other that I can't remember what it was. I think that's in June. There's like another one in June whose event name escapes me. But like Cube, if you're going to KubeCon and you want a t-shirt, I will be there. I will personally hand you a t-shirt. If you're going to DevOps Live, Jay, who you've seen on this channel a couple of times, is going to DevOps Live. He will personally hand you a t-shirt. So come up and say, "Hey, we really love the Ask an Expert," and we'll give you a t-shirt.
We're also going to be at Scale in Pasadena this coming weekend. I'm flying out at 6 a.m. on Friday to go there, but such is life sometimes. We're also going to be at DevOps Days Chicago coming up on March the 19th. Great little conference, that one. So, yeah, lots of places to go. If you want to find out more about our events and things like that, you can sign up for our newsletter and we'll give you a regular Tailscale in real life breakdown. Alrighty, so back to the questions, I think. Where are we at over here? Okay, is there any chance of a tutorial for GCP VPCs and subnet routers, such as the existing one for AWS?
There isn't yet, and the primary reason for that is that we have a lot more AWS customers than we do GCP customers. But this is great feedback. We do have a lot of hyperscaler documentation backlog. I have enough GCP knowledge to be dangerous, and so if you would like to open an issue in our docs repo, if our trusty Tim in the background can grab the docs repo, please open an issue there and then tag me or the docs team on it, and I will take a stab at it. I think the general practices that I think are useful to understand are running EC2, running an EC2, I'm so AWS centric, running compute that runs Tailscale and then subnet routers for the virtual network will be, 9/10 of the solution to the problem, basically.
So what's required on the AWS side? I know the question was about GCP, but I'm now curious, like, why is AWS so special? What's special about a subnet router in a VPC?
I mean, I think this does apply to every hyperscaler or data center, is that all these hyperscalers have these managed services. Amazon has RDS, Google has Spanner, all these different managed services where you don't have operating system access to be able to get Tailscale installed directly on it. And you still probably want to access your database, or you want to access your managed service in that way. And so a subnet router will allow you to advertise in AWS, it's the VPC. In Google, it's like the network. Google networks are kind of unique in the fact that they're globally distributed. It's kind of an interesting model versus all the other hyperscalers. But you can basically put a compute instance in that network, advertise the network range, and it gives you full access to that entire network. Again, it applies across all the hyperscalers generally.
So am I right in thinking that if I put a subnet router inside a VPC that had access to an RDS resource, for example, I'd be able then effectively to put that resource on my tailnet? Are there any gotchas there?
Correct, yes. Assuming the subnet router can access, there's no security group blocking the particular compute instance to the managed database, yes, you essentially have full access there. The security groups still apply, but the connection looks like it's coming from the subnet router. So you create this encrypted tunnel between two Tailscale clients, like your laptop and the subnet router, and then it looks like it's originating from inside that network, like the call is coming from inside the VPC. So they're really useful for these managed service providers and these hyperscalers, and this applies to every single cloud provider you can think of. DigitalOcean has VPCs now. Linode has VPCs now. You can basically advertise the entire network. There are caveats here that we like to point out on the solutions engineering side around ACL and grants and stuff. Probably not worth going into that because I am aware that we've got about 6 minutes left. This has absolutely flown by the way. Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's generally just good practice across the board.
Yeah, good deal. So I've put a link, by the way, in the YouTube chat to someone asked earlier on, how do I report issues and make feature requests? Easiest way right now, if you're not already a customer of Tailscales, is through the GitHub repo. The second easiest way is to reach out to Lee and the sales team. How do people do that?
So we have a sales@tailscale.com alias, which will get you in touch with our account executives. Now, I'm going to make a pitch here. I spent a long time getting email by account executives from random companies who wanted to call my desk phone at my office to talk to me about this random thing that I didn't care about. That is not how our account team is operating. We are here to help you be successful with Tailscale. And I work closely with the account executives, and our job is to make you successful. If you want to get technical advice, we do have an email alias that goes directly to our solutions engineers, but we like those to go through our support team that we work very closely with. So our recommendation is to email support@tailscale.com. And our support team work very, very closely with the solutions engineering team. So if you have a specific question about, hey, I want to give you folks some money. Sales@tailscale.com is the right way. If you have a technical question, support@tailscale.com is the right way. And if it needs to be escalated to us in terms of like solutions engineering, and to differentiate between support and solutions engineering, support is how do I do this thing? Solutions engineering is the conceptual, how would I achieve this thing? In terms of like future state and future looking. We do help on the SE team with support-based questions, and we're all one team at this point for all intents and purposes. But if you have a reactive question, then it would go to support. If you have a proactive question, then it would go to solutions engineering.
Absolutely. Now, we've got a brand new person that just joined Tailscale. I think she's in the YouTube chat already, called Natasha. She's our brand new community manager. So keep an eye out for her in the comments and some of the future live streams as well. I'm sure she'll be involved on camera very soon. And we're going to really invest pretty heavily in trying to make sure that folks have got outlets for some of those technical questions that they don't necessarily want to have the sales pitter patter, all that kind of stuff. That said, we still need to pay the bills. So tailscale.com/BTW to find out about how to bring Tailscale to work, and everything else that Lee just said at support@tailscale.com, the GitHub issues, all that kind of stuff. Now, we've got a couple of minutes left, but none of these questions I think that are left really fit into that time frame, I'm afraid. So I'm probably going to wrap things up a couple of minutes early because I do have another call to jump to pretty
Me
much
too.
straight after this.
I think it's a symptom of our success, Alex, that we have so many questions we can't get through them. Hopefully, if you didn't get your question answered, we should think about how we can get those questions into a format where we can answer them like asynchronously. So we'll have a chat with the marketing team and the community team about how that could look in the future. Keep those questions coming. If we didn't get to your question today, we will get to it next time. I love this time. It's my favorite thing to do at Tailscale. So I appreciate everybody joining us.
Conference silly season is just about to start winding up. So I think you might see a couple of different faces on this channel over the next month or so, but we'll do our best to get to those questions. And Natasha, I hope you're listening. We need to find a way to capture those questions and present them asynchronously to our community people. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. We had, several hundred of you watched today. That's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for everybody that showed up on the YouTube side and the Zoom side as well. We love you very much. And until next time, I've been Alex from Tailscale, and
I'm Lee.
all right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.